Hello, welcome once again. I'm Imran Garda and you are in the stream. Today, the lives of Amerasians, mixed-race children of US military servicemen, face discrimination and challenges growing up in Asian societies. And in Nigeria, how well is the government responding to the threat of the Islamist group Boko Haram? Our digital producer Ahmed Shihabuddin is here as always, looking out for all your live feedback. Next to Ahmed on the couch is May ALHASSEN. She's a writer and doctoral student in American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California. May, welcome once again to the program. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on.
Hi, once again, thank you for having me on. I am a doctoral student, as you have mentioned. I'm starting my third year. I am currently going to be co-editing a book with somebody to my left in purple on voices from the Arab Spring, and continuing writing on Huffington Post and other things. There should be an article by me about Tunisian hip-hop soon.
Is that what you're following at this moment in time?
Actually, some stories that I'm looking at are the recent crackdown in Syria. 26, I think, were killed, including a 12-year-old boy shot at a funeral procession. It's the latest story. And a story from last week about black unemployment hitting its highest rate in 27 years. Okay,
well, welcome once again to the program. Look forward to your thoughts as we expand the discussion and look at different topics. May ALHASSEN joining us. Now, as always, you can tell us what stories matter to you. Follow us on Twitter. Send a tweet with the hashtag AJStream. We could feature your suggestion in a future episode.
Hi, my name is Wajahat Ali. I am a playwright, the author of the play Domestic Crusaders, and also the lead author of the report Fear Incorporated, Exposing the Islamophobia Network in America, and I'm in the stream.
Now, the term Amerasians refers specifically to the children of American military servicemen and Asian mothers. These children can be found in the Philippines, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, in fact, all Asian countries that have had a US military presence. In the Philippines, following the 1992 closure of the US naval base in Subic Bay, more than 50,000 children were left to grow up without their fathers. As mixed-race children, they faced high levels of discrimination and identity-related problems. Now, a documentary called Left by the Ship uncovers the plight of Filipino Amerasians and the challenges they face. Take a look.
Anytime there's any military presence stationed at one point, they are human beings. They're going to get their biological urges. Children get left behind. It's just a fact of life.
Now, joining us to discuss this via Skype from Rome is Emma Rossi LANDI, who co-directed Left by the Ship with her husband, Alberto Vendemiati. Emma, welcome to the stream. Thanks a lot for joining us. What inspired the film? Why was this so important for you to tell?
Well, I am an American citizen myself. I am half Italian, half American, and it was very easy for me to get my blue passport when I was a child. And I've always really been interested and compelled to tell stories of people that live between two cultures. And when I found out about the Amerasian, especially the Filipino Amerasian problem, both me and my husband Alberto and co-director, we were very, very interested in letting the world know about it, because there's very little that is told about, especially about the Filipino Amerasians. The Vietnamese, they have been assisted by the US government. There was that Operation Baby Lift in the 1970s. The Amerasian Act itself, it's a 1992 law. It's called the Homecoming Act. And it's made in a way to assist the sons and daughters of American servicemen who were stationed or who had been to Vietnam, which is obviously very important, but nobody has ever cared about the Filipinos. And the Philippines were an ally to the United States, and one really wonders why the allies did not get a chance.
Interestingly enough, I mean, from all the people that you met, is there a common thread of abandonment from all these children of US servicemen? And the wives, of course. Oh, not
Yes,
wives, but the women.
When the bases closed in 1992, several families were brought to the United States. Those were the lucky ones. The ones that were not brought to the United States stayed behind, especially when these women were ex-sex workers, or when the relationship was not that stable, as in somebody having another wife maybe in the United States. I mean, in our documentary, we do not mean to blame the US servicemen whatsoever. They were 18 years old, you know, they were brought there, but it's a government that has to take the responsibility of having created a huge naval base in the area of Subic, where prior to the creation of the base, it was a fishing village. So there was a huge sex red light district that was there to serve the rest and recreation of the soldiers. So it's not something that you can blame on the individual. It's something that has something behind it.
Okay. Emma, I want to show another clip from
Sure.
your fascinating film. Now, for some of these Amerasians, the internet serves as their only link to their fathers. This next clip introduces Miss Ollie. She's a woman who teaches a group of Amerasian children how to locate their fathers using various methods on the internet. Let's have a look.
Bibigyan ko kayo mga search engines at kung paano gamitin yung mga search engines na yun. Kaya kailangan mga informations talaga na mag-fit doon sa hinahanap mo.
Sa tatay ko, hindi ko talaga, wala akong alam. At saka hindi ko alam yung, ang alam ko lang pangalan niya, alam ko lang yung barko. Tapos, anong sasabihin ko? Ayoko naman sabihin na hindi ako nag-try, di ba? Hindi ko inalam. Gusto ko na meron din akong sasagot.
Ang best way to locate our father is through a military website. Ito yung website na kung saan
It's fascinating because she actually then, you know, shows them on Google Earth. They can actually see the homes of their fathers, but can't quite get in touch with their fathers. Was there an emotional journey for you as well, Emma, as you were making the film, seeing all of these emotions unfold in front of you?
Yes, absolutely. It was. Also, the documentary took more than 3 years in the making, so we really tied close relationships with our characters, and we were really hoping that something would turn out positively. And well, I won't say it because people will have to see the film when it's broadcast. But yeah, it was a very learning experience for all of us involved, I think, and hopefully it was also a good experience for the people that were in the documentary, for our main characters. There is a really strong self-esteem issue with Amerasians in the Philippines. The fact that they were not recognized by the US government in any way, and the fact that everybody can see on their faces that their dads abandoned them and that maybe their mothers were prostitutes. Not all Amerasians' mothers were sex workers, but many were. So it's a real stigma to live with that. You can really see them in the street, and everybody else can see them. So they have a hard time finding a job. They have a hard time fitting into society, really. And so hopefully this documentary sort of helped the whole situation.
Emma, you spoke a little bit about stigma, and I understand, you know, they were called, some of these Amerasian kids, dust children, and they were subjected to serious discrimination in their home countries, and now in the States, I'm assuming they are as well. And on Twitter, we have Kixes who's asking, is there any support for Amerasians in the event that they do get a visa, or do they just end up lost in the USA?
It's a really hard situation because there is no real support for Filipino Amerasians to get a visa to get into the United States. And once they're into the United States, there's no support system. There's no, it's something that, you know, is not really spoken about. It's something that's kind of left in the past, which in a way is understandable because in 1992, you know, the base is closed and it was the Philippine government that decided not to renew the treaty. But that doesn't mean that the children have to pay the consequences of that. And they do not have a good life in the Philippines, and who knows what kind of life they will have in the United States if they get the chance to go there. And it's not like, the United States is Wonderland, and that whatever happens there is you're going to be happy ever after. Really, what I think is that if only the government, the United States government, together with the Filipino government, would recognize the fact that these children exist, it would already do a lot for the kids and for their self-esteem. That would really do a lot.
Emma, this is May. I'm a guest co-host today. Hi, buonasera.
Buonasera, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. My question, I want to go back for a second. Why is it this law, this 1982 law that was passed for Amerasians, it included Thailand, Vietnam, and Korea? Is there any sort of light as to why the Philippines were excluded, and I believe Japan was excluded as well? And
yes.
And related to that question, what is motivating the search for these mixed children's fathers if there is really no viable visa application process for them?
Well, to answer your first question, we interviewed many people. We made interviews in the United States as well, which then were not included in our film. Nobody has an answer to that. Nobody can really answer why Filipino Amerasians were excluded from the Amerasian Act of 1982. What happened there, I think, is it was considered that being allies, Filipino Amerasians were less stigmatized than what it was for, of course, Vietnamese being sons and daughters of the enemy. But that turned out not to be true at all. And maybe the fact that it was the Philippine Senate that voted against renewing the treaty for the military bases, that might be another reason, but then that was afterwards. I think they were just forgotten. I think I don't really know if I can say that, but they were allies, and so there was no need to pay back or to help out, or I don't know. To answer your other question, it's very important for the kids to know who their father is. That's something I think that is universal, and everybody would really, everybody who grew up without a father really wants to know who their father is. It's something that belongs to all of us. If you don't know who your dad is, you're missing out part of yourself. And so a lot of the kids really want just to contact the person, know who he is, what he looks like. It is in a way the fact that you have a longing and you hope this man that you don't know will help you out, but it's not really a money thing. It's really more, maybe my mom was a sex worker and my dad, who is he? He's this guy in the United States. Who is he? I want to know who he is. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it does turn out well, and there are various associations that are working with that, but a lot of times it doesn't.
Emma,
yeah.
Emma, unfortunately, I've got to jump in there because we are running out of time for this segment.
Sure.
The film is called Left by the Ship. It uncovers so many interesting things, including the issue of racism, where those children whose fathers are African-American servicemen. Issues within the Philippines as well, and the stigma that you mentioned. So I don't want to give too much away.
Racist people are everywhere.
Yes, I don't want to give too much away. I hope people will actually watch the film. Left by the Ship is what it's called. You can get a taste of it if you Google it on YouTube and Vimeo, etc. Emma, thank you very much for joining us and for shedding light on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Now, of course, remember you can read more about the story on our website, stream.aljazeera.com. You'll also find more videos and clips from our previous shows there.
Today, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan began his 3-day visit to Egypt, and some have claimed this trip will serve as a barometer of how popular he is in the entire Arab world following the region's uprisings. But as you can see in the image behind me, a huge billboard of Erdogan next to the October 6th bridge in Cairo reads with this sentence. It says, "One hand together for the future," and you can see the Turkish and Egyptian flags. Now, if that's not an indication of support, then I don't know what is. But in his speech to the Arab League, Erdogan took a position that was popular amongst many Arabs and said Israel must, quote, pay the price after refusing to apologize for its raid on a Gaza-bound aid flotilla last year. But online, Twitter users started to point out what they see as the elephant in the room, the Kurdish issue. Hevalo, a pro-Kurdish rights activist, said Erdogan is like a man who beats his wife savagely but smiles to the people in the Arab street. Now, in recent weeks, Turkey has launched airstrikes on Kurdish separatist targets in northern Iraq. And on the topic of the airstrikes, we have Miran Hosni all the way from Australia tweeting, "For the life of me, I cannot fathom why someone with such strong ideas on Israel could order his own human rights violations on Kurds." And in Egypt, Ahmed Al-Aish tweeted in Arabic right here, we translated it for you. He says, "Who can meet me in an hour at 4 p.m. in front of the Opera House to raise the Kurdish flag in Erdogan's reception, which happened at the Opera House?" He says, "If you want to, respond quick." Now, that was just one of many tweets from Egyptian netizens, but also one of many stories you suggested to us here at the community, the community rather. So here are some other topics that we're following on Twitter. So tomorrow we will have Saudi activist Manal Al-Sharif on our show to discuss the women's campaign to drive in Saudi Arabia. And to help us collect your comments, we're asking you to use this Twitter hashtag, when a Saudi woman drives, and finish the sentence for us. So give us your thoughts, and we could definitely feature your tweet on the show. So Imran, back to you.
Thanks for that, Ahmed. Now, this next story is one many of our online viewers have been telling us to cover for a long, long time. In Nigeria, a recent wave of attacks against banks, police, and other targets is being blamed on Boko Haram, a group which the Nigerian government has deemed an extremist group that may have links to Al-Qaeda. Members of Boko Haram promote a type of Islam which forbids anything related to Western society. Last month, the group took credit for a car bombing that killed at least 23 people at the UN headquarters in Abuja. So what is President Goodluck Jonathan's government doing to prevent future attacks, and how effective can their efforts be? Also, let's try and understand Boko Haram a little bit. I'm going to show you a photo in just a second, which stems from a tweet that we received regarding Boko Haram. Wiziera had sent us a tweet saying why Boko Haram still succeeds, and he had a link over there, and it was to a cartoon which showed a police officer taking a bribe from a man passing him by with a bomb, suggesting that anything goes in Nigeria as long as you can pay somebody off, and suggesting myriad other things as well, which we're going to get into with our guest, TOLU OGUNLESI, a columnist with a Nigerian newspaper. Next, TOLU, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. Help us understand Boko Haram, not only the group itself, but the environment that gives rise to a group like this and the vacuum in which they operate.
Boko Haram is an extremist sect, and it's important to make that clear that it's a sect. Nigeria is almost evenly divided between Muslims and Christians. So what that means is that we'll be speaking of as many as 70-80 million Muslims. Most of the Muslims in Nigeria will not share the views that this sect shares. And the name Boko Haram basically means Western education is forbidden. Western education is sinful. So it's an ideology. The ideology is anti-West. But even then, that does not quite explain a number of things. I mean, they use car bombs in their operations. They have a blog, so it's quite difficult to decode.
But not only, Tolu, not only are they against the West, it seems as if they're also against the northern Nigerian regional government with a semblance of political autonomy, because there's a form of Sharia for the Muslims in northern Nigeria. And reading the reports of human rights groups, for example, they would say in northern Nigeria, given the Sharia that runs there, somebody might be persecuted for stealing a goat or stealing some food. However, a politician who steals millions will be let off the hook. It's that sort of dissatisfaction with even the type of Islamic law that is around in northern Nigeria, which creates space for Boko Haram to recruit amongst the disaffected people. Would you say that that plays a big part in this?
Yeah, it's one of the many contradictions of that ideology, you know, that says Western education is forbidden, but at the same time chooses to take a lot of northern Muslims as targets. At the bottom of this, I think, is I mean, we cannot take away the influence of economic conditions, of poverty, which means that there's a willing and massive army of people who can easily be sold this ideology. There's a lot of poverty, and it's easy to build up an army of people, and it's also easy to point out to make enemies of people who seem to be better off. Mm-hmm. I think that the wider the gaps between the haves and the have-nots, the easier it is to use that gap to justify violence, to justify anger against an establishment.
Tolu, we have a lot of people on Facebook who are commenting on what they see to be the big, large issues that need to be addressed. And Fortune Nwai Wu, I believe is how to pronounce it, says Boko Haram is not a threat to Nigeria. The biggest threat the country is faced with is the government. He says there's corrupt people who have occupied posts at the 3 tiers for over 5 decades, created conditions that have precipitated crisis situations across the entire country. And like you spoke about, he cites poverty, illiteracy, and unemployment as having reached epidemic proportions, and that this is at the heart of the problem. Do you agree?
Oh yes, definitely. The conditions that have enabled sects like Boko Haram to exist, a lot of them can be blamed on government failures. And these are not failures, you know, that we can date back to a year. These are failures that have happened over a long time. So there's a failure of government, for example, to do basic things, jobs for people, economic opportunities, and even more importantly, there's a failure of government to tackle sects like Boko Haram, which just means that when a sect like this challenges the government and appears to gain the upper hand, the likelihood of it continuing in that line in that stance, you know, is high.
Okay, Tolu, I just want to bring May in. Stay with us because we're going to continue to talk to you as we go into our post show for our online viewers at stream.aljazeera.com. I want to show you a video as well. I want to bring up this video of extrajudicial killing by the police force of those accused as being Boko Haram supporters. May, we have less than a minute on the TV show. Just your thoughts to sum up before we go into the post show.
Well, I wanted to ask him a question. I probably will during the post show, hopefully, about he was about to go into discussing the criticism the government is receiving for the reaction to Boko Haram, and I was wondering what the different strategies the government has used in dealing with Boko Haram and the Niger Delta militants, and what are the criticisms that President Goodluck Jonathan is receiving?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got numerous insurgencies, if you want to call it, in Nigeria. We'll get into that in the post show. The movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, one of the big problems facing Africa's most populous nation. Ahmed, May, thanks for that. We'll stay with you in the post show as well as with Tolu. Thanks for watching the stream. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to the Post Show. Let's go straight back to Tolu Ogunlesi, who's joining us via Skype. We've been talking Boko Haram in Nigeria. May made a very good point, saying that Nigeria has numerous issues, one of them being MEND, the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, who has had its own insurgency, particularly regarding oil wealth in that part of the country. How has the government differed, was her question, in addressing MEND as opposed to addressing Boko Haram, and why should the policy differ?
As far as I'm concerned, I think that I have seen similar policies or a similar government intervention, you know, with both MEND and Boko Haram. And I mean, that government policy, as far as I'm concerned, is confusion. In that there's an amnesty that has been extended to MEND. But before the amnesty, there was an attempt to wipe MEND out using force. That failed, and then, you know, an amnesty, a controversial amnesty came up, which so far has managed to curtail MEND. Now we have an extremist sect in the north, and the same confusion that has attended the government's response to MEND is obvious, is evident now as well. There's been an attempt to use force, the army. There's a part of government that has been speaking of an amnesty with the militants in the north. But at the moment, there's nothing like a coordinated government response that will give anybody any confidence.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because I want to address some of this. You know, their leader at some point, Muhammad Yusuf, was executed, and his execution was shown on television in Nigeria as well. And we had a report with some exclusive footage. I'm just going to roll some of it here. It's from Jazeera English. And of course, when we uploaded it onto YouTube in February 2010, since then it has received almost 500,000 views. It's about an incident in Maiduguri where the Nigerian police force had basically leveled what was you know, the headquarters of Boko Haram. But then most disturbingly, if you watch the video, it's quite appallingly disturbing. You see the Nigerian police executing people in cold blood, extrajudicial execution of people accused, unarmed people accused of being members of Boko Haram. I mean, surely at some level, the Nigerian government has to realize that this is not going to work. You're going to create more followers for the group if you just gun down people in broad daylight and video it.
The government did think, and this is my opinion, that killing Muhammad Yusuf and destroying the Boko Haram headquarters will put an end to the organization in July 2009. Obviously, that hasn't worked, and you know, it's doubtful that an approach like that would have any significant long-term positive effects. But we still find that happening today. There's still a lot of extrajudicial killings going on, and caught up in the middle of these are innocent Nigerians in the affected places, who are both at the mercy of the militants and at the mercy of the state, of the soldiers, of the army, and of the police. So it's a difficult situation. And well, the earlier the government started to fashion out some intelligent way, I think, of dealing with the situation. I mean, the earlier that started, the better for Nigeria, for national security.
Tolu, I just wanted to ask, you know, we've seen and heard that the ongoing struggle on a political level between, you know, the North and South, or the Muslims in the North or the Christians in the South, has been an issue as to why, you know, Boko Haram might, or it's like a contentious issue, let's say. And then on Twitter, we have Gutmang pointing out that desertification, he says, is causing tension in central Nigeria as Muslim herders in the north are moving into land of Christian farmers in the south. So how much is it a sectarian issue? And how does desertification factor in and things like that?
it's important to avoid a simplifying impulse that attempts to make every episode of violence something of Christians versus Muslims or North versus South. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. It's always a lot more complicated than we think. And I think that it's important to avoid anything that attempts to simplify it in a simplistic manner.
Tolu, do you agree that that Al-Qaeda label is a simplification, given that there's no proof that there's actually any operational links to Al-Qaeda? There might be ideological links in some way or another, but do you think that it hinders understanding of Boko Haram, of Muslim-Christian tensions, of North-South tensions, by throwing the Al-Qaeda link in the mix when there's no evidence for it?
Well, yes, it does complicate matters a bit, because putting Al-Qaeda in the picture automatically just takes this, I guess, to the level of, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and it may wipe out the local perspective, the local elements. I mean, this is a peculiarly Nigerian situation as much as it is a global one. So it's important to keep this in mind, that while there may be Al-Qaeda links for which there is no concrete evidence, we should not allow that kind of thinking to obscure the fact that there are local, the anger behind the militants is a local anger. It may be empowered by some international ideology which may come from anywhere, but at the heart of it, it's local anger, it's local poverty, it's very local. So it's important to keep those two views in mind, the local and the global. And there's no understanding of it that will,
Okay, Tolu, I have a question about the central government's tactics in dealing with Boko Haram. I'm wondering, because you mentioned that it's ruthless and some claim that it's high-handed violence on the part of the government, what do they hope to accomplish with this diplomacy if it hasn't been received well? And are there any talks of approaching the group differently?
Well, yeah, so many ideas are regularly bandied. There's, using the army is one, which has, the government has done that. There's also the whole talk of amnesty. I think the argument with the amnesty is if you work with men, the militants in the Delta, maybe you will work with the militants in the North. We have seen one or two instances where state governors in the North have apologized to Boko Haram. So it's all of it just speaks of one thing, of confusion, of a government that is not quite sure what it should do. It speaks also of a failure of national intelligence, of information gathering, of a database. It speaks of a failure of government policy. The example I like to use is after 9/11, we saw the Department of Homeland Security emerge in the US to coordinate the government's response to Al-Qaeda. We haven't seen anything similar.
But is there any discussion of addressing the structural problems that we had mentioned, poverty, illiteracy, as being possible motivations for Boko Haram to gain some sort of traction with people in the North?
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, the government constantly talks of, policies to deal with poverty, but it's important to understand that, you do not wipe out poverty by announcing policies. It's important to note that these are a lot of failures working together. There are failures over the last 1 or 2 decades, if not further than that. It's going to be difficult to completely wipe out those grievances in a matter of weeks or months. But the earlier we started doing that, making attempts, the better.
Ahmed, you want to come in?
Yeah, Tolu, I just was going to say, Gutmang also tweeted in saying there's this unspoken rule in Nigeria that the presidency shifts between a Muslim and a Christian. And this goes back to the sectarian thing. I think you're right to say we need to be careful to not just, attribute everything to that. But a lot of people say that, the attacks, as a result of this, the attacks by Boko Haram might even be, coerced by the northern elites, let's say, in order to try and draw attention to this and make it so that the government is ungovernable, basically?
Well, Boko Haram came to limelight when a Muslim president was in power, which, 2009.
Yes.
So that's I think weakens that argument that it's a ploy by the North to make Nigeria ungovernable. The amnesty that settled the violence in the Delta was initiated by a Muslim president. So these things undermine those arguments that attempt to cast violence as a binary thing, North versus South, Muslim versus Christian. Boko Haram started under a Muslim president, so it's I think that there may be elements who want to make who want to put forward a sense of an ungovernable land, but that's not at the heart of these issues we're speaking about. It's definitely not at the heart of it.
All right, well, we're running out of time. One last thing I'll throw to you, though. Duty on Twitter is saying, the federal government seems confused. They have no strategy. This is a common theme amongst our comments. Do you think they have a proper strategy in dealing with Boko Haram?
Well, no, they don't. And that's the point I attempted to make, well, I hope I've communicated over and over again over the last 10 minutes, couple of minutes, that there's no coordinated government response. There has been no institutional change. Not in the last 1 year has there been any significant institutional change that shows a government determined to combat the violence.
Okay, Tolu, thank you very much. You've been thoughtful and helpful. It's been educational for all of us here. Thanks a lot for joining us on the stream. May ALHASSEN, as always, thank you very much. Ahmed, see you tomorrow. I know you've got a scratchy throat, but don't you dare call in sick.
Lots of lemonade.
Thanks for joining us on the stream. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You come in, it's like you're in a